First of all, I want to thank everyone for joining us today from across the country and around the world. I am Michael Higgs, the Virtual Programs Manager here at CCI. And on behalf of the entire team, we appreciate you taking time to learn and grow in community with us. Today, we're excited to be sharing space with Ben Kennard and Ben Mand. As many of you know, Conscious Capitalism is a global community of CEOs, presidents, founders, board members, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders from diverse industries, backgrounds, and perspectives who are committed to the shared purpose of elevating humanity through business. We were founded in 2008 as a 501c3, providing a community of active operating leaders, a platform to share practical advice and tools on how our principles are integrated into different organizations and within various industries. Our community of conscious capitalists offers best practices and business strategies on how the philosophy is applied to create sustainable success within one's business, leading to systemic change and impact in the world. Several times a month, we offer our virtual gatherings like this as a way for the community to see how this philosophy takes shape in the leadership's journeys and business practices of those in our network. For those that have just joined us, feel free to drop into the chat. Oh, I just got a message, it's disabled. One moment, let me fix that. Okay, fixed. Again, thanks, Cynthia. Let us know in the chat where you're joining us from today. It's always exciting to see where our participants are from. Little housekeeping details before we kick things off. Today's session is going to run for about 45 minutes. Ben and Ben will be in conversation for about 25 to 30. And then we're going to transition to questions for the last 10 to 15 minutes of our time together. Please do use the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen to submit any questions that may come up during today's session. And we will get to as many of those as we can during our time together. All right, to kick things off, about today's session, over the years, many companies and consumers have joined the coconut craze, and it's for good reason. Coconuts offer a variety of nutrients and even a broader product range. But as with any rapid increase in demand, issues around environmental impact and the rights of those who produce the products, they come into question. One company in particular, however, has risen to meet these challenges head on, Harmless Harvest. Under Ben Mand's leadership as CEO, Harmless Harvest is changing the coconut game and elevating the food and beverage industry to an impressive degree. From a relentless commitment to stakeholder orientation to prioritizing regenerative agriculture practices and restructuring the company's supply chain to ensure zero coconut waste, Ben's innovative conscious leadership of Harmless Harvest has helped double the company's revenue in just 4 years to more than 100 million. In today's conversation, Ben is going to share more about his approach to using business as a force for good and tips for engaging your stakeholders and focusing on your top priorities to deliver extraordinary business results. He's also going to provide more insight into the environmental and economic implications of running a zero-waste company and ensuring compliance of your company and industry standards among global vendors. Now, for some quick bios on our guests. As I said, Ben Mand is the CEO of Harmless Harvest, pioneer in the U.S. refrigerated premium coconut water and plant-based dairy products. Ben has more than doubled Harmless Harvest business in under 4 years and successfully transformed the company from a solely brand focused on coconut water to a leader in premium functional beverages and plant-based dairy, ultimately transforming an unprofitable business into a durable and scalable company. Prior to joining Harmless Harvest, Ben oversaw all marketing, innovation, and creative strategy for Plum Organics, a leading organic baby food brand, and quickly accelerated the brand from number 3 to number 1 in the category. Prior to Plum, Ben worked in various brand marketing and innovation roles at leading companies including General Mills, Johnson & Johnson, and Interbrand. Our moderator today is Ben Kennard. He currently serves as the Chief of Staff at Fairtrade USA, a nonprofit supporting farmers and workers in 51 countries. Prior to his current role, Ben worked for the World Fair Trade Organization, started a fair trade campaign at his university, spoke about fair trade on the TEDx stage, and was named one of the 10 biggest fair trade advocates in the world by Fair Trade International. All through his work, Ben has visited farms in Costa Rica, tomato farms in Mexico, apparel farms in Vietnam, and most relevant to today's conversation, coconut production in Thailand. Ben, welcome. Ben, welcome. I pass it to you to have a conversation, gentlemen. Thanks so much for being here today.
Amazing. Thank you, Michael, and welcome, Ben. And just so impressed to hear about your background. And, it's clear to me that you have a philosophy that a rising tide lifts all boats, because Harmless helps support farmers who even provide crops to competitors to Harmless Harvest. So really excited for this conversation, especially with another Ben, whom I admire so much. And I'm excited to learn about you, Ben, and learn about your journey. And I think our listeners are too. So let's jump right in, shall we?
Yeah, that sounds great. Thanks, Michael, for the introduction. And Ben, awesome to spend some time with you. Not only do we share a little experience in coconut, but I didn't realize also Costa Rica. I lived at an organic coffee farm in Costa Rica. Did some volunteer work there years ago when I had brown hair, not gray hair.
Amazing. Well, it sounds like we'll have a lot to talk about, and maybe there's a part 2 to this conversation beyond coconuts then. But to start us off, Ben, maybe just tell us about your personal journey, maybe where you grew up, perhaps some of the kind of formative experiences that led you here today.
Yeah, happy to do so. So I'm originally from Wisconsin. I'm a first-generation college student. I grew up in kind of an old farm. Both my parents grew up as dairy farmers, so I'm very familiar with farming. In fact, my first house was my parents, it was not a planned pregnancy, so they bought a trailer and parked it next to my grandparents' barn. That's where I spent my first 4 years, is on that farm. And then when they separated, I went back and forth between both grandparents. And so, I grew up with very little, and, had lots of chores and stuff to do. And I think that, really, as I reflect, was something that really had a very positive impact on me. So, when I got my first job, that was, not mowing lawns or babysitting, it was at a private golf and country club. And that really showed me what education can do. And when you see doctors and lawyers and business people and whatnot, I realized, like, I don't have to work at a factory. I don't have to work at as a checkout clerk at a grocery store. I can go to college. And so that was, gave me a, good insight as to, what I could do. And I applied to one school and went to one school, and that was the University of Wisconsin-Madison. So, it didn't, I didn't really have role models or anybody to kind of think of, like, oh, I could go outside the state. I was told that only rich kids could do that. So it didn't even cross my mind. But, when I went to school, one of the things that I started to realize is how naive I was. Like, I, grew up on a farm, and had kind of some, each Saturday I'd go to the dump and find treasure. So my first bike came out of the dump. When when we didn't heat our house with a traditional furnace. We used a wood burning stove, and that only heated the main floor. So you could see your breath, and there was frost on my walls, and the carpeting was my stepfather got all the extra remnants from the carpet store that were free, and then nailed them to the floor in my bedroom. So, like, just kind of crazy things on, like, how you get by. But the hard work really served me well, and that's, I really started employing that as I went to school. I worked up to 3 jobs while I was paying for college. But I realized there that I was a pretty naive kid. I didn't, there was so much I didn't understand and had not been exposed to. So I did 6 years undergrad, which, most people have an undergrad and a master's degree by then, but that was all undergrad. I did a year abroad in Germany and then a semester at sea. So 1.5 years of international studies, which really, really helped me, because it definitely expanded my perspective. And I recognized that, I needed to learn so much about the world and about people and business and those types of things. So that's where, those were very formative years. That's where I met my wife. And she was also a first-generation college student. And what has been nice about that is not only do I have a partner, in life, but when you're looking for that role model, or just kind of like, hey, what do I do about this? Like, she also studied business and does much of the same stuff as I do. So she was somebody I could bounce ideas off, and she would bounce, she, as a first generation college student as well, she wasn't, we didn't grow up with these things and kind of those role models. And so she would bounce her ideas off me on what she was trying to do. And so that has been really helpful in kind of figuring out, what we do next. And so started in consulting, management consulting, which I realized, or I figured while I was in undergrad, was a good place to kind of get a general understanding of the different types of business, both from a functional standpoint as well as, from an industry standpoint. And that was, I would say, really helpful. It's, while I was there was, definitely another kind of realization in life, is you have to do what you love, like what you're passionate about, because you spend so much time working. And on some level, when you love what you do, it's not really work. And so when you have spare time, when I'm out for a run, I'm thinking about work, I'm thinking about different things. And so that was a strong realization. We actually quit our jobs to go to Central America. We both occasionally would step back and kind of, over dinner, kind of write down on a napkin, what are all the things we want to do in the next 5 years? And we both want to do some more volunteer work, and we wanted to learn Spanish. So we quit our jobs to go to Central America and do volunteer work. They didn't let us quit. They gave us a leave of absence, which was kind of nice. And so we took 3.5 months, and we started in Costa Rica, and we lived in an organic coffee farm, and it was a cooperative farm. And so we did various different projects, shucking seeds, planting seedlings for a windbreak for the coffee, harvesting stuff, turnips and things like that they used to feed the families. In the beginning, we lived separately, so we learned Spanish faster. So that was a really good experience, and went to Guatemala, did some more volunteer work. I was in charge of organic composting at this garden, which was maybe the smelliest job I've had. But yeah, just really great, experiences, and just really that started to really solidify my passion for just the food system. Having grown up on a farm, and then seeing different types of agriculture and ways of approaching agriculture was interesting to me. From there, went back, did consulting, went to the West Coast, did consulting again, and then decided to go back and get my MBA. I would say when I was doing consulting in San Francisco, another important realization in my life, I thought that CEOs and C-level executives were like these uber brilliant people that are just for like the most special people on earth. And when I was doing consulting and I was meeting with a lot of C-level executives, I started to realize that, listen, I'm not ready to be a CEO yet or be at that level, but I think I have what it takes. Like, this isn't rocket science. There's a lot of experience you need to have, a lot of things that you need to be able to kind of come to the table with. And I wasn't ready for that, but I knew someday that actually I could do that if I wanted to do that. So I went back, got my MBA. My wife did nonprofit work while we were in Chicago. And then she went to Philly and got her MBA, and I worked for J&J, worked on a global drug launch. It was not my most ideal kind of position. It was a great job and stuff like that, but she ultimately had an internship at General Mills and gave her an offer, and they wanted her badly enough that they made me an offer as well. So we both went to General Mills. And so that was the beginning of then, working in the food system. And I loved my experience there. So super talented people, but I really learned how to run a business. And, many people talk about like changing the food system and changing how Americans eat. And I totally agree with that. And I actually took that approach while I was there. So, everything from like removing MSG from Progresso soup to lowering sodium, doing a silent migration away from sodium, taking artificial colors and flavors out of, kids' snacks. And, when you reach 20, 30, 40, 50% of Americans in a year, and you can deliver less sodium, less artificial flavors, doing those types of things, you are having a positive impact. And when you streamline supply chains and take out excess packaging and corrugate and miles on the road and all those types of things. Densifying pasta so you can pack more on the truck because you cube out a truck instead of weighing out a truck. Like all those things have really positive impact. But ultimately, I wanted to bring my full self to work, and I wanted to take something small and that was inherently amazing, and how do you make it even greater, right? How do you get it to more Americans and more people, globally, and scale something that's really positive. And so ultimately, my wife and I came out to the West Coast to start doing that, to start living into that.
Beautiful. And, it's so fun to reflect kind of on those early years to what brought you to where you are today. And I'm curious about the journey, not only to CEO of Harmless Harvest, but the journey to sustainability at Harmless Harvest. So maybe could you give us a clue on kind of your commitments to things like regenerative agriculture, organics, fair trade? Tell us about the sustainability journey at Harmless.
Yeah, I would say it started just a little bit while I was at Plum Organics, just for me, on just the light bulb going on for just a number of different facets on how you can be impactful. For me there, it was really deeply embedded in food philosophy. So, little ones, whether, it's mom pregnant with a little one or little one is born, all those first things that you're feeding that little one really matter. You're building a person. And so, we always say you are what you eat and drink, and that is so true. And so how do you get better nutrients? How do you make it more nutrient dense? How do you be supportive to parents to make sure? And so that was fundamentally really important to me there, and really shaped, just even from an innovation standpoint, as we transitioned away from like ready-made purees to grinding fresh, frozen vegetables and fruit to make our purees. So you get a fresher input with better texture, better color, better nutrients, and really start, operationalizing that for the business. But it was also there that, we transitioned to a B Corp and really started to understand all the different positive ways that you can have an impact. And it was there that I also realized just that importance of balancing, like you got to have a profitable, like a decent business that can support. And the more successful the business is, the more impact you can have. And so I ultimately was excited to come to Harmless Harvest. And I chose Harmless because fundamentally, it's an amazing product, first and foremost. And just, when you're in CPG, it does start with like, is there a good product? But importantly, the foundation was there of a really responsible business. Harmless Harvest was founded on the principles of constructive capitalism. So the whole idea that everybody should benefit, not just financial investors. And so starting with farmers all the way through, how can you have a positive impact? But what was interesting to me is, there's a lot of business challenges, and I felt that there was still more they could do from an impact. And so it really, when I think about like, what's the right opportunity for me and where can I have a positive impact, I felt I could fundamentally kind of fix the supply chain of the business, kind of start building innovation, building out this business, and then have a more positive impact in communities, both from a planet and a people standpoint.
So well put, Ben. And, we're here with Conscious Capitalism, and it sounds like your philosophy on constructive capitalism just really ties in nicely. And I kind of have a hunch that your philosophy on this version of capitalism is kind of just well put by one of the statements on your bottles that says, we're not perfect, but we wake up every day with the intention of doing less harm and more good. So could you tell us what that means to you, Ben? Tell us how that ties into your philosophy and even the company culture and how you make decisions as a business leader, from supply chain to people to brand.
Yeah. Well, for good or bad, like I do have a strong bias for action, and I fundamentally, and this is just something that I've kind of learned over the years as I've had to kind of roll up my sleeves and figure things out, is if you want perfection, you have to just start doing. And I think so often people, and I experienced it here, and I'll go through that example. People know where you need to get to, and they are keen on getting there, and they don't want to just take the steps to get there. It's frustrating, and it doesn't feel like you're doing much if you're not getting to what we all think we need to get to. But most of the time, most every time, there needs to be steps along the way, and you just need to start doing. And that was something that I really preached to this organization. And when I took over, the board was like, we need to talk more about our mission. We need to do more about that. And I'm also kind of one of those, you can't say you're funny, you just have to be funny. So you have to do. Like, I don't mind storytelling the stuff we're doing, but I don't like storytelling the stuff that we haven't even gotten to, right? And I prefer, yes, you can talk about where we're going, but you need to have some like proof points along the way, and you need to be doing the work. And so for the organization, as we, when I took over, one of the things that struck me is like, okay, we're using virgin plastic on these plastic bottles. People are frustrated with plastic, and there's a range of different plastic and a range of, like, let's say, not reusable, recyclable to recyclable, which has, different kind of implications on how good or bad you may think they are. But I knew we had an issue there. Without going through all the details on how we picked the vessel to put our product in. I mean, the long story short is, as I talked to every expert I could, I recognize that at the end of the day, from a carbon standpoint, plastic was the best. And from a waste standpoint, 100% recycled plastic, so no virgin plastic, was the right way to go. Technically, though, because we blow our own bottles, the technical team felt that to start with, we can only go to 33% RPT, and the other 2/3 was virgin plastic. And the team was just like, it's not even worth doing. It's disappointing, whatever. I'm like, it is absolutely worth doing. Number one, it is pushing, us forward and getting more recycled material in. But second, you just got to start learning. Like, if there are technical challenges, start using this stuff. Like, practice makes perfect in pretty much everything we do. Like, you don't become a great marketer by just doing one thing. It's a muscle. You got to do it over and over and over. And to get good at, refining your supply chain, you got to do it over and over and over. It's not, you don't just jump to perfection. That's kind of true for everything you do. So, I have a strong philosophy of just like, we got to start doing. And I also sometimes like promise things to the world of like, this is our goal, this is what we're trying to do, which freaks the hell out of my team at times, because they're like, we don't exactly know how we're going to get there. I'm like, well, we're going to figure it out, because it's the right thing to do. We need to get there. We're going to be transparent along the way and how we're doing, what we're learning and whatnot. But like, part of my job is to push the organization, push us, and drive action. So that has been, I think, just a key thing is just, you just have to start doing.
Yeah, doing less harm, doing more good. It's a very kind of encouraging, momentum building approach to the way you change your business over time. What is, kind of widening the lens, what is your vision for impact at Harmless Harvest? So what would you ideally like to see by getting your coconut water into the hands of more consumers?
Yeah, so fundamentally, I want to democratize our product lineup a lot more. It has traditionally been a very expensive product, which I will acknowledge, but we have not been taking price increases, and I am like, tireless in trying to find efficiencies on this business to get rid of waste, right? Waste, which often affects the environment. So when you eliminate waste, you eliminate, both the financial and the environmental impacts. But how do we keep, driving to democratizing it? And the reason I want to democratize it, because we make a great product, and we think we can even have a more positive impact. So our goal is to be net positive from a climate standpoint and a greenhouse gas emission. So, that is ultimately our goal. And so by buying our products, you're actually having a positive impact environmentally and in communities. So that to me is kind of our goal, first and foremost with coconut. But then, Harmless Harvest to me is not purely defined by coconut long-term, right? That is what, what we started with. And that is what I'm committed to getting to Fulbright. But what is, long-term, what is that next agricultural item that has known challenges from an environment standpoint, or labor challenges or abuses, where we can bring in a positive model of working there to then bring innovation that consumers want, right? So that's a tough trifecta to kind of hit, where you're, environmentally, socially, you can bring about kind of innovation and positive impacts. But on top of that, bring also then a product or a set of products that are innovative, that solve a need in the marketplace. So we've done some work on that. I think there's some exciting opportunities for down the road.
Amazing. And It is an expensive product, but I promise it's worth every penny.
It is.
It
It
is.
really is.
It is the gold standard of coconut water. If you've ever had, and I'm speaking to our listeners because I know you know this, Ben, but if you've ever had a coconut that's just been freshly chopped open and you stick a straw in it, this is the closest you will ever get to that. So, and this is probably the closest you'll ever get to the source. So, Ben, maybe tell us about your experience at the source. Tell us, I imagine you spent some time in Thailand where you source your coconuts from, spent time with farmers and farms and production facilities. Could you maybe take us on a journey to Thailand, to one of these farms, and tell us what impresses and inspires you about the people that you work with in Thailand?
Yeah. So yes, I've spent a lot of time on farms in Thailand, and certainly with our team in Thailand. We have about 28 agronomists that are on staff that work with farmers on organic farming, and now actually regenerative organic farming. We also have a separate team of folks that are just on compliance. So we also visit farms, and we at times will disqualify farms because they're not, we recognize either maybe there's a neighbor that is using, non-organic materials that's a little too close, and we got to do a little bit more from a barrier standpoint. Like there are a number of things to try and adhere and make sure that we're living, our mission that we have to do. So, for me, it starts just in farming in general. And one of the things that's fundamentally really important to me is organic versus conventional. So my father he passed away a few years ago from multi-system atrophy. And it just turns out one of my friends who I used to live near in Minneapolis is a professor at the university there, PhD. And he specializes actually in this and Lou Gehrig's and other kind of neurodegenerative diseases. And one of the questions he asked me is like, did he grow up on a farm? I was like, yes, he did actually. And he said, it was not an organic farm, I take it, right? And I'm like, that is correct. And he said, high correlation of the pesticides, like the chemicals used in farms with these neurodegenerative diseases, so Parkinson's and multi-system atrophy and all that. And so, it was something that is very personal to me on like, how do we transition more of our farming practices to first organic was, the first thinking. And then as I joined Harmless Harvest and started learning more about regenerative organic, actually a decision I made back in September of 2018 was to start transitioning the company to regenerative organic. And so regenerative organic, it's all about building up that soil health. And you do that through biodiversity, right? Mother Nature is not meant to just have one tree. So an almond tree is an example, or a coconut tree, and nothing else in that farm, right? It is all about the coexistence with, plants and animals and insects and fish, lizards, whatever it may be. And so how do you build greater biodiversity? That starts building in better soil health, better soil moisture retention, which ultimately also leads to even better yields from a tree standpoint. So made the decision to move to regenerative, and the farms, the farmers were really engaged, and we had really good relations with the farmers. But we compete transparently with the Chinese on, they buy coconuts as well, and they don't care if they're organic or conventional. They don't even care, but they cut them into what we call diamond cut coconuts. So if you ever see it in the store where you can just put a straw in it, that is a diamond cut coconut. And so we often had just a little bit of a leaky bucket with kind of the farmers that we work with. And part of what struck me is there's just not enough price premium and a way to make sure that we compensate farmers in a greater way. So starting to transition to regenerative organic, one of our goals was, how do we raise their incomes by at least 10%, build greater stickiness, and then have a more positive impact from an environment and community standpoint, and ultimately also potentially help Harmless Harvest also from a yield standpoint. So in these transitions, what we're seeing is better soil health, better moisture, and we still need to collect a lot more data, but anecdotally, it looks like we're starting to get better yields. And so when you think about climate change, we're going through a drought right now in Thailand. Like when you have better soil health and structure and moisture retention, you get more coconuts per tree and more ml, so more liters per coconut. And so that helps farmers because they have more coconuts to sell, but it also helps us because then we're getting more water per coconut. It helps our overall profitability. It takes years and years to pay out, but it's I have a much longer term kind of point of view on how you run a business. Like there are always decisions you have to make that are not going to pay out for another 5 to 10 years, but it's the right thing to do from a business standpoint, the right thing to do for the communities that you work with. So what we're starting to see is through intercropping, cover crops, beekeeping, and all the things we're doing, we're actually lowering their costs and they're getting extra sources of revenue. So you're starting to see more beautiful kind of lush green farms that are more biodiverse, more productive, and farmers are seeing the benefit. And part of it is like convincing them along the way. Early days, we have to like really financially incentivize and pay for the cover crops and all these other things. But now, especially our early pilot farmers, they go on and start advocating for us because they're seeing the benefits. And we're starting to see the early signs of a bit of a groundswell as more and more farmers make the conversion.
Incredible. We talk about this in fair trade a lot, where when you invest in the people, you build a more resilient supply chain. And in your experience, it sounds like you invest in the environment, you build a more resilient supply chain. And it's so encouraging to see that those investments do pay off over time, and not only for the people, but for your business and for the environment. So love to hear kind of all of that coming together. And I guess my next question for you, Ben, is around when you take that philosophy into your brand and your company with your people, what does it mean to kind of lead with both head and heart? And what does it mean to you to invest in your people at your company and at Harmless?
Yeah, I fundamentally, it goes back to something I said earlier, believe that you have to really enjoy and love what you do. And you spend so much time with your employees. And I'm trying not to say the term family, because that's what I always say. Like, we are one big family. And I believe, I know for me, and I believe for others, when you love what you do, you believe in the company, you'll go that extra mile and you'll do what's right for the business. And, one of the things when I interview people, I don't, interview for like technical capability and all that, like the teams do that. My job is like, why do you really want to work at Harmless Harvest? And the reason I really care about why people want to work here and what their view is, like how business can be a force for good is, mission is at all aspects of and all levels of the organization. The team is, this next round of goals, after I freaked everybody out with the first round of goals, are quite audacious. And they really came from the team and a cross-functional team, right? And, we vet them, we talk about them, like, when can we, how hard can we push on this one, that type of thing. But it lives at all levels of the organization. And to me, that's really important. And, we have our turnover rate is, I think it was 2.7% this year or something like that. And, the Bay Area average is over 15%. So it is, to me, you not only have to invest in making it an enjoyable place to work. I fundamentally believe I'm a very experiential learner. And I believe I pay people to think. I get paid to think. People get paid to think. So I do everything possible to try and make it a safe environment for people to speak their minds. I need to hear what you're thinking and why we should do this or that or whatever it may be, and have a good, robust discussion. And then my job is to really take it in. And if it's my decision, to make the decision. If it's not my decision, then it's that person, whatever person's, job to make the right decision for the company, right? Take it all in and make that right decision. And so creating that kind of culture, I'm also big, because I came from very little and didn't, had to kind of figure things out. I'm a massive believer in just giving people different opportunities. So I think a lot of times people think from a career standpoint, it's always just kind of this vertical, but I do a lot of horizontal moves with people. So, somebody who has been in marketing, moving them into sales and sales into innovation. And I move people on. It's all with like conversation, like, where do you want to be? Let's say 5-10 years, what do you want to be, doing? But it benefits us because you can take talented people, give them greater perspective, and new experiences, which makes for better decision-making, better collaboration in the organization. But for them, gives them new skills and new opportunities such that, someday, people move on, right? So someday they have, greater, options to kind of find what they want to do next. So I'm also a big believer in moving people around and getting creative with org structures.
Amazing. Maybe one more question before we move into Q&A. I know our audience is probably dying to learn a lot more about you, Ben. In the audience, we have a lot of business leaders, we have CEOs, we have aspiring CEOs. How do you, as a leader in a company, balance your life with your work? You mentioned that your colleagues are kind of like your family. I imagine your work life is a big part of your life, and I'm curious just how do you intertwine the two and connect the two, and maybe even sometimes separate the two when you need to?
Yeah. So the first, and I said this, but just, you got to love what you do so it just doesn't feel like work, which is good on one side. That can have a shadow effect, a shadow side to it as well. But you need to follow your passions to a certain degree. And then from there, my approach is I'm a much more integrated when let's say I'm traveling for vacation or something like that. When you're the CEO, and you've got a board and whatnot, you can't always fully unplug. There are times you can, and then you deputize somebody to kind of take the lead. So first, you have to have an amazing team around you. So hiring the right people, developing the right people is first and foremost probably the most important thing you can do when you come into a company and stay in a company. And that means just to run it effectively, but also when you're gone, you've got a team that can handle it. Like they don't even need you in some regards. The second is, for me personally, I just kind of carve out a little bit of time. So I might get up before the family, or we do the day and we come back to the hotel or wherever we're staying. And like from, 5 to 6:30 or 4:30 to 6, I'll sit and I'll do some work, right? I'll get my stuff down. I quick just check things, make sure nothing's on fire, so to speak. Get my stuff done and then leave and then put it away. I'm very careful with folks. If, sometimes, Saturday mornings, like Friday, I have to admit, like Friday afternoon at like 2 or 3 p.m., I hit a wall. I have a hard time being very productive. And, it's not something I'm terribly proud of, but it's just the reality. And so I don't get as much done then, but Saturday mornings are a good time for me because I'm kind of fresh, revitalized. Family may still be sleeping. I wake up anyway. So I'm up, 7 a.m. and I'm, doing stuff. I mean, I will tell the team, they know, like, listen, just because I'm emailing you on Saturday morning or doing whatever, that doesn't mean you have to answer over the weekend. Like you do you, like when it makes sense for you. But this is like a time that where I can be productive and get my stuff done. And each person, I as a leader need to make sure that I allow the flexibility for people to get stuff done. I am a very big believer in just deliver great results. Be a great team player, do great stuff, be accountable, all of that. I don't care when you're in the office, where you're at and stuff like that. I do encourage people to be in the office on occasion because I think collisions are important to keeping culture positive, to solving problems, to innovation, to creative thinking, all that. Like those things are important. But it doesn't have to be every day, 9 to 5 or anything like that. We don't have any prescribed days where you have to be or times that you have to be. And I live that. Like you have to live, you have to lead by example. And so I believe in flexibility. I believe in being accountable and, finding what works for you.
Beautiful. That's the beauty of asynchronous work, right? We can do work when and where we need to and how we need to. Ben, I was a huge fan of Harmless before I met you, and after our conversation, I am now officially a mega fan. I did not need more excuses to buy your coconut water, but now I have them. So yeah, let's move into Q&A with our audience. A few questions have actually come through the chat, so I'd love to kind of pose them to you if that's all right with you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so one of the first questions we had was around Harmless Harvest's perspective on B Corp. So yeah, could you tell me sort of what's the status and what would be Harmless's approach to becoming a B Corp, and what are your thoughts on that, Ben?
Yeah, so I firmly believe B Corp is a good thing. The last company I was at, we converted to B Corp. We've done an initial assessment. We did it a few years ago. We clearly pass. And I would say in the foreseeable future, we will become a B Corp. Mostly, so I look at the certifications. I think it's a good kind of like check mark for consumers. Like people need just kind of quick, like, oh yeah, good. They're organic. It's B Corp. It's what, whatever they're looking for is important. It's a quick check for consumers, but it's also part of my job is building a business that perseveres, that keeps driving impact beyond when I leave or anybody in our company is here. So you want to believe that you could put in all new leadership and all new employees, and the mission and the impact and what you're trying to do lives on. And so by having these outside organizations always there to kind of keep checking, it not only keeps, it's like an outside check to make sure, yes, we are making the progress that we think we're making, or in some cases, no, we weren't even looking at that, and that's a new way of looking at it. And they give you examples like, well, such and such company, we can put you in touch with them. They did, this is how they solved it, or this is what they did. So to me, it's really healthy, from an outside perspective, and it just makes sure that 20 years from now, that Harmless is living, the vision that I had for the company.
Cool. Thanks to Michael S. for that question. Another question from Brandon T. I love this question. With the overall Harmless Harvest ethos focused on regenerative, force for good, and constructive and conscious business practices with the growers and overall company, what influence do you have to extend your values to third parties like distributors, food brokers, trucking lines, retailers, other folks kind of in your industry and environment?
Well, one, I'm terribly tenacious, and so you can ask my team. Like, I do talk to partners, and I do push on these things. When you're a small company in the grand scheme of things, like it's tenacity replaces a little bit of, and squeaky wheel, that type of thing replaces kind of size. Most of business is about leverage. Who's got leverage, right? And unfortunately, we don't always have a lot of leverage, but doesn't stop me from trying to push the envelope. So. Absolutely. There is a corrugate manufacturer in Thailand. There is some technology. It's not commercially viable yet, where you can take our husks and you can make paper for them that you can then laminate into corrugate. Now, it would take millions in capital for them to do it. I think there's nothing better. I mean, well, there is something better, but we have lots of coconut husks to use. We're working on biochar as well, which to me is a little bit of a holy grail as well from an environmental and especially carbon sequestration standpoint. But things like that, pushing them, the ocean freight, which turns out to be exceptionally efficient. When we did our overall assessment, I was surprised at how little of the emissions come from global freight, but still finding better ways. And they are starting to invest in more environmentally conscious ways of shipping products, both across the ocean, but then even within the United States. So it is something that we push on and ask. It takes when many small voices give you plenty of leverage, as well as the tenacity and the constant, pushing, the squeaky wheel approach.
Yeah. Well, if we have any listeners who are willing to invest those millions into the husks to corrugated cardboard innovation, then I think we're all ears. Reach out to Ben after this. You're getting a lot of love in the chat too, Ben. So I just want you to know that folks are really gravitating to a lot of the insights that you're sharing with us. If you could change, this is another question from one of the attendees. If you could change one thing overnight, instantaneously in the industry, Ben, what would it be? In your company, maybe it's the whole coconut water industry. What would that one thing be?
Here's the thing. The next generation of consumers, we're already over time, if you ask people, do you want to do, good by the environment, good by people and stuff like that? And it doesn't matter, if you're now 80 years old, 50, 40, all the way down, everybody always says. The difference between say and do has always been a pretty wide gap. And that has been a little bit frustrating. But you are seeing with the younger generations and just where we're at right now, environmentally and socially, people are that gap between say and do is collapsing, which is amazing. And I would say that is one thing I want to further accelerate and get more people to do, not only just for Harmless, but for other companies. And the second is honestly buyers. You know, when you're dealing with buyers who are making decisions on products to bring in, I totally agree. You have to bring in good products. Like you can't just bring a product in because it's responsible. But you know, they say it's good, but I don't see evidence where buyers are making the decisions like, okay, I've got two really good products, but this one is giving back to communities. This is whatever. They don't make decisions like that yet. And even, you know, a little bit in the natural channel, but you'd be surprised at how many buyers don't take enough of that into consideration. There's still a fair amount of lip service and less action on like, you know what, this is what tipped us over. You guys are making the right investments. You are a brand of the future, and this is what we're going to do. And so I would challenge consumers to keep, you know, like I want to see more people, you know, doing what they say, and I want buyers to do what they know is right.
Beautiful. I have one last question for you, Ben, and then we're going to hand it over to Michael to close us out. This was actually kind of mentioned in your intro, and based on your business ethos and philosophy, I can almost imagine some of your answers to this. But how does Harmless ensure, or does it even ensure, that the farmers that are part of your network aren't supplying to competitors and others in the supply chain, or, you know, giving preferential treatment to other buyers in the supply chain? How does that relationship sort of work, Ben?
So we've made a conscious decision as we're investing millions to transition farms to regenerative. We're doing not only farms that we know are quite loyal to us, but even farms that supply others. So we are doing it. We believe it's the right thing for the community, and so we're investing in it all. It is, you know, the competitive side to me, and knowing that I have to have a business that's paying for this. So I want consumers to give preferential treatment to us. You know, there's a bit of a conflict. I will admit there was a conversation, and like at first it was 40% internal and 60% external farmers. I was like, okay, if we're the ones paying for this, can we at least make it 50-50 or maybe 60-40? But like, you know, I want to help others, but I also, at the end of the day, I gotta fund the business. Because when you have a successful business, you can keep doubling down even more on the rest. So I believe you have to do it to all. I also, you know, this is also a fundamental belief I have, is like consumers don't always understand all the intricacies. It's our job as leaders to make the right decisions. And so we always talk farmers. Honestly, I think the most vulnerable are the harvesters working on these farms. And so that has been that was an observation I made on the farms. And it's, you know, validated by the team. And so, you know, we're working also to how do we more positively impact harvesters. Consumers, when you talk about marketing and that little sound bites you put out there, like a harvester doesn't necessarily make sense to people. So we always talk farmers, but I know we also have to impact harvesters.
Well said, Ben. Wow. Well, thank you for this amazing conversation. As I said, I am officially a mega fan of Harmless Harvest. I hope that we have 100+ new mega fans too, who are all listening in. I'm sure that they are. And just huge thanks, Ben, for your transparency, for all of your insights, your leadership, everything you're doing in the industry, and for bringing this insanely delicious product to market, because I enjoy it, I know, on the regular.
All right. Thanks, Ben. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, Ben, thank you so much. And again, I know we've gone a bit over. What an engaging conversation. So much, Ben, you've offered so much to the audience to think about. The energy, the inspiration as people are thinking about the coming year and how they might lead their teams, the focus on doing and taking action. Incredible stuff. Ben Kennard, thank you for moderating. For those that are joining us, I am just going to quickly put a survey link in. Takes about 30 seconds to answer. This does close out our 2023 virtual programming. We will see you back in 2024, but what a remarkable close to the year. Ben, thank you both so much. Have a fantastic holiday season to both of you and to all of our guests joining us.